Right. Today is November the 8th, 2019. We are interviewing Bill White at the Kent Historical Society. I am Sandy Hallam. With me is Jim Myers, and we will be interviewing him today about Kent. First of all, where and when were you born?
I was born in Holmes County, Mount Hope, Ohio. It's a little town that had about 30 people, maybe 40 people in it. That's down in, and we were mostly Mennonites, and we were the only English family in town.
And what year was that?
1928.
1928. When you grew up in that particular area, what was did you go to school down there? And
Well, I'll jump ahead a little bit. I went to 12 schools in 12 years. And the reason for that is we moved from Mount Hope to Winesburg because my father took care of the Amish gas wells. And when I was 8 years old, he died. So we had no money after that. And so we just moved wherever we could to live. Then my mother got remarried, and we moved temporarily up to Brady Lake. And then later we moved to Trumbull County, and my stepfather was a teacher, and at that time he got hurt, and so I moved in with an aunt and uncle down in Millersburg again, down in Holmes County. And then later, as we back and forth, went back up to Brady Lake again, and this time I stayed there till I went through the service. When I came back to the service, I moved down to Millersburg again, and bought a little business down there. Went failure, no good, and I was asked to play baseball for a town called Sugar Creek, and I moved down there and worked in the brickyards, wheeling brick, which is one of the toughest jobs, is piecework and so forth. And I played on the ball team, and one day our pitcher in our team always brought his girlfriend with him, and I went up from the diamond to talk to him for a minute, and there was a girl standing there beside the car, and we talked for a minute, and then I was standing behind yet, and the woman asked this girl why she came to watch the ball games, and she said she'd come to watch the third baseman, and I happened to be standing right behind her, and they set up a double date for us, and I forgot about it. And the next Sunday after a game, we always went to our sponsor's place, and I'm in there, we're having a beer, and she walks in and looks at me and says, "You owe me a date." And that took off, and after the first date, well, she had something planned every day, and then we finally got married.
how old were you when you got married?
I was 20 and she was 18.
Wow. And that, in the time that you were living in Brady Lake, I'm just really interested, what was life like? Was the amusement park going then? Just give us a little.
Yeah, let's go back to,
that's a wonderful
10
time.
11 years old. I lived right past the roller coaster called Eureka College, Eureka House, I mean, and us boys would, in the summertime, would go up there and play and sneak into the park every day and go into Laughing Dark and different things, and it was a very lively place. Then we moved, and we moved over to a place called Cook's Court and lived there for a short time. And next thing I knew, we moved again, and we moved up to Trumbull County. And what happened is, at 13, I worked at a muck farm up there. It was the only income we had all summer. And At that time, now it'd be violations what we done. We worked 5, 10-hour days as a kid at 13, you know, week and so forth. And then that's when my mother and stepfather decided that they couldn't handle us kids, and that's where I went back down with aunt and uncle. But Brady Lake was really an exciting place to be around in his early days. I mean, people was walking every place. The trolley cars was coming out, people getting off of, and I running around in the summertime, got very, very dark. And I can remember a couple of people asked me whether I was white or black.
In the dark?
In the summertime, yeah. And yeah, there was good days. Of course, we fished all the time too.
In Brady Lake?
In Brady Lake, yeah. We knew where the bass was, and we knew where the bluegills were, and white suckers, and all that stuff.
There were, when that streetcar, people of course haven't seen that for a long time. Could you talk a little bit about taking that streetcar?
Well, I would take
the interurban.
Yeah, the streetcar we'd either take it from here to Ravenna, or back to the bus station in Akron. A couple times I had to go someplace. I'd travel on bus, and yeah, that was something, right? But it was a treat to go from Brady Lake to Ravenna.
Was it a couple of pennies, or what did it cost? Do you remember?
I have no idea, but it was probably a nickel. Probably was a nickel at that time.
At what point did you come to Kent, Ohio, and why?
Well, the important part of my life, I came to Kent in 1950. Not that I hadn't been here, Brady Lake and Kent, but I had a job. I went to work for Republic Steel, and we just got married and moved up here. And so after so long, I had an offer back in Sugar Creek at the hotel there. I moved back to Sugar Creek temporarily and worked at the hotel and helped manage it and stuff. Well, we had a restaurant, pool room, and all that stuff. And it wasn't very comfortable. We moved a mobile home from down here. Well, I could go back a little bit to 1943 when my dad owned a service station at Manaway and Crane Street called that's Pennzoil Station. And I worked in that, washing cars and greasing and all that.
Was that your father or your stepfather?
Stepfather. And he also had a taxi company, and I got a special license to drive the taxi car when I was 15 years old. So for 6 to 8 months I drove taxi here in Kent, by the way, too. And I moved so fast, I'm getting ahead of myself and back, you know, forward and backwards.
That's okay.
And but when I come to Kent the last time, well, when I was here at 14 or 15, I bowled down at Pop Myers Bowling Center.
And where was that?
Down below the Need Help Jim.
Eddie Holden's.
Eddie Holden's, yeah.
Right next to the mill.
Downstairs at 7-lane center. And Pop Myers gave me a bowling ball, conventional ball, and I turned out to fit pretty good. And I bowled, and then we had a gentleman by the name of Ray Caniglia, who was top bowler in this area. He set up matches. I was bowling all the men around here that for $100 for 20 games, we bowled 20-game matches. And I won them all but one. I lost to Ori Ferrenti. And but he would back me. If we won, I get to keep the money. If I lost, why, he paid for it.
Uh-huh.
So that was when I was 14, 15 years old living here.
And that was Pop Myers is our own Jim Myers' father, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Wonderful gentleman. I set pins for him too, by the way, for a couple months. I went back and set pins when it come winter time. And I don't know, but we must have got maybe 5 cents of line or something. And then they have what they call shadow bowling before. And the only way we would sit there and send the balls back was if they'd throw money down the gutter. They'd throw dimes down the gutters for shadow ball in those days. Remember that, Jim?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, they'd throw dimes down the
Good story.
gutter. But then I came to Kent and to reside here.
You decided to settle.
Decided to
Make your
settle
home.
here, yes. I came up here and lived in South Water Street, and I went back to work for Gallagher Machine. And,
This is after the war then?
oh
At what
yes,
time?
yes. By the way, I was on a troop ship going to Japan in 1945 when they dropped the atomic bomb. We was going to enter an invasion. And that was in 1945. And after, we didn't know, see, everything was ticker tape in those days. Then we'd find out a day or two later what was going on. And we heard about the first atomic bomb. We didn't know what that done. Then we got the second atomic bomb. Then a few days later, in the morning, got up and one of the guys said, hey, the ship turned around during the night. And here we found out that they'd surrendered, so they turned most of the ships around to go to certain places. And they went to, they left me off at an island called Saipan. And for 4 or 6 weeks, I had no knowledge, they had no paperwork on me. And all I did was sit up high and guard Japanese prisoners.
Of war.
Had a big gun like this, don't even know how to use it, but then our orders came. Then I got on a repair ship and so forth, and then late in 1946 I got discharged and came back to Kent and so forth. And then that's when I went down to Sugar Creek, as I talked about before, or Millersburg, then Sugar Creek. And then I come to Kent and worked at Gallagher Machine for a while.
What did you do at Gallagher?
I run a turret lathe.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty busy then too, wasn't it?
Yes, we had 1,300 people working at that time. Actually, if you want to interject something, the day I turned 14, I went to work at Lamson Sessions. I forged my birth certificate. My stepfather helped me, and we made it look like I was 16. And so I worked out in Wilson's Department 15. I always remember that, threading little nuts. And I don't know if you ever heard of Stan Ambrose or not, but he was a guy that worked right beside me. And I worked there, 6, 8 months. Then I went to Gallagher's and so forth. But to get back on date here, I interject some of this stuff going
That's
back.
fine.
And I
It's a
think
great story.
because I wasn't prepared, sometimes on this. But anyhow, 1960, 61, 60, yeah, 1960, Twin Star Bowling Lanes added on a pro shop and restaurant and all that, and he asked me to run the pro shop. Well, what happened is, during that time, actually I don't know how to say it, but I was sort of the top bowler around this area.
In the Akron area.
And even Akron, and as a state match game champion, and I also had, in 1 year there, I had the high average in the state of Ohio at 220. That's back where, like 1959-60, when they didn't have averages like that. And that's how I got the job at Twin Star, because of my background in bowling.
Did they think you would people would want to come and bowl because you were there? Were you also bowling, or were you working in the bowling alley?
No, I just run the pro shop.
Okay.
And maybe the best deal, Jim will know this from business point of view, the best deal in the world. They give me I got to keep 25% of the gross. I had no expenses, no nothing. No matter what I'd done, and we only made $5 on a ball, and they was paying me on the gross, they lost, you know, and so forth. So it was a good job, and I kept working. Then I went, at that time, I was working at Colonial Machine then. I'd moved to Colonial Machine. I was down there for a number of years, became a leader down there, and as something a lot of people don't know, I experienced as a worker the first plastic pipe put out. I worked on the first molds. I had us in a place called, that was in the 1950s. And you know those plastic pipes you use for every place? There was no such things before that. And by the way, Colonial Machine still works on them. And we started the invention of them. And then 1964, 65, one day, Ralph Slates, that owned a golf course across the street there, asked me about managing the bowling lanes. And he had a full-time restaurant there at the same time.
Oh.
But I just was supposed to manage the bowling lanes, and didn't know what to do, And so about 6 weeks after managing the bowling lanes, he came in the office door and threw me a whole set of keys. He said, "I want you to run the whole place."
Wow.
And
how old were you there then, when you were doing that?
what?
How old were you at that point when you were going to run this all? How old of a man?
Well, that was 1965. So I was almost 40 years old.
Right.
I was 37 years old, I guess. We call it 37, yeah. So that started my career in business. And my work in the pro shop down there and being around it continued, I knew who was stealing and who it wasn't. I did, I really did. I knew who was stealing. Very prominent people too, by the way.
And they were stealing what?
They were selling bowling balls out, they were...
Really?
Yeah, the pop machines and all of it. And I knew all that when I became manager, and it created quite a scene there.
Could you stop it?
Very quickly. Because I'm much against stealing, you know. And, oh yeah, I had a lady that was managing the restaurant, got upset with me. She always carried a big pocketbook like that. She came to my office to complain to me, and she got so mad she slammed it down and opened up. It was full of steaks. and someone Jim knows too. But anyhow.
Could you just stop and tell us a little bit about how popular bowling was during this time? Because it's different now, so how was it
Yes.
then?
Well, actually, Twin Star never hit it off to start out with. They went through a number of managers, but it never took off. And actually, I had an idea when I got there, going into the next spring of '66. I put in 4 extra phones on the wall. We was allowed to cold call them, and I hired about 6 or 7 people, and they just kept cold calling, and we come up with ideas. I come up with 25-cent bowling on Sunday morning, which was only 55 cents for regular bowling at that time. And we started filling the place, and with the help that I hired, it turned out that we just kept promoting. And it's like when I took over on Wednesday and Friday night, we had no leaks in the place. And within a year, we filled the whole place up, and by 1967, we had the place double, 40 lanes first shift, 40 lanes second shift, and very, very busy. And then, and you have to coordinate with your health, as Jim would know. I mean, we had meetings continually going over everything. And what the reaction was for people, because people didn't hang up on your phone calls those days yet, you know. And I'd get the input from what the people thought. And what we did, we took sections we'd call, and here in Kent, and Ravenna, and so forth. And at the same time, Jim's dad was managing down here to Kent Lanes. What year did he go to university?
49 and 50.
Yeah, he was down there. But see, there was so many people had never bowled before. So it became the thing. And
Men, women, children, I mean, did you have a
no, it's
complete?
mostly men and women to start out with. Then we went to children. And what happened is in my life, come 1969, if people that owned the bowling lanes, I was just managing, they started coming in and needing $100, $200 out of the register and stuff, and they were in the construction business. It was tough right then in 1968, 69, into the 70s. And I knew that things were going bad. In the meantime, the Paul boys from
Manaway.
pardon?
Manaway or Garrett?
No, Garrettsville.
Yeah.
Came down and talked to me, and they said their bowling lanes was going to shut down, and wanted to know if I would come up and run it, they'd give me 25% of the business of it, because they had it on the market to sell. Well, 25% of nothing was what it was. I took a terrible, terrible pay cut. I would like to go back to something in 1966. They made a contract with me that for every paid line I got an extra nickel for it. So that's why I got so aggressive it was. And by the time, at the end of the first year, I was making twice as much money there as I was at Clothing Machine, because of the promotion part of it. And so I left, it was Midway Lanes then, by the way, they call it Midway Lanes. I left there and went up to Sugar Creek, I get Sugar Creek in my mind, Yurtsville, and Jim can relate to this, machines were terrible. The first 2 weeks I was there, June 15th, 1969, I went up there. Machines were terrible. The first 2 weeks I had one customer in 2 weeks. I got hold of a gentleman that wanted to get in the business part of it. I sent him to Shelby, the training school for AMF. From back, we got the machines running, and we worked on the phones just like we did there. And we got all the leagues back. And during this time, a woman called me up, well, right after I got there, and she called me up for a job on the lunch counter. After talking to her for a while, I said, "You really want to work at the lunch counter?" She said, "No, but I need a job." And I said, "Well, are you married? We could do that then." And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Can I talk to you and your husband at 6 o'clock that night?" So they came in, and I fell for her right away. She just, we talked, and I said, "How would you like to become my right-hand person here? You know, desk, promotion, everything." She's very aggressive. She had a big mouth, you know. Her name was Sue Wenzel, and she was secretary of the Sunday night mixed league there, by the way. And we started out. They never had a summer league there in history, and we went ahead the same as a Twin Star. Within 1 year, we filled the place up. And we had a mixed doubles tournament that turned out after 3 years to be the biggest in the state of Ohio. So, and then we had a lunch counter there that we had self-serve ice cream and stuff, and there was no Dairy Queen, so we had what we called our Dairy Queen there. And so we was a bowling center that made more money in the summertime than we did in the wintertime
Whoa.
because of the restaurant, of the lunch counter and that. And during that time, the Browns were at Hiram, and during their training time, they hung out at my bar all at that time. So anyhow, I had 3 successful years there, and all of a sudden in March of 1972, a bank come down from Cleveland and asked me about how about buying back Midway Lanes, the business and equipment. They wanted $100,000 and take over the loan, and I said, I don't even have $1,000. And they came out 2 or more times and talked to me, and they kept reducing it. And the 4th time, 1st of June, they came down to me, and what they're doing is foreclosing on Midway. And next time, another guy came down with him, and he says, Bill, he says, how about you just taking back over Twin Star? You just take over the loan. Well, it's June, and I had no money, and there was no leaks in the summertime, and the liquor license is suspended, you know. And I'm sitting at a table on the concourse of Sky Lanes Bowling, and there used to be a woman that worked for Palachina next door as a salesman. They had a garage there at the time, and she'd come in on Saturday morning and watch the kids and stuff, and she heard about me taking over, and she heard I didn't have any money, and while I'm sitting there, one day she just reached over her shoulder and handed me a $10,000 check, which would be like $100,000, you know, and says, I hope this helps you, pay me back when you can. And there was a $21,000 electric bill that I had to pay at Midway. And what happened is, High Edison used to be here in Kent, and the guy who was managing it, him and his wife used to bowl out there when I was there in the 60s. When I came back, I went down to talk to him, told him my situation. He says, Bill, you know what? He says, I'm ready to retire, but he says, every once in a while we can write something off. And to help me out, they wrote off that $21,000 thing. But the meantime is, I didn't have any. I had to get the liquor license reinstated, and we done the same thing again. Someone that helped come back and work for me for free, that was with me in the 60s, and we done a promotion again just like I did before, and didn't take any time at all to fill the place back up. And but I had the lease. They still owned the building and land, these people that went bankrupt in there. So in 1974, one day I got a phone call from a lady named Sue from Mellon Bank in Pittsburgh, and said, I hear you're having a tough time, you can't make your payments and stuff. And I said, that's not true. I said, I'm 3 months ahead because I dealt with Citibank, and I'd been down there telling that the people that owned the building offered me a free month if I'd paid 3 months ahead, you know. And I said, heck, I didn't have any money. And you got to help me, Jim. Green was the...
Dave Green.
Dave Green was the president there at the time, and he heard me say that, and he says, Bill, what do you mean you haven't got that money? You got money for that. I said, no, I don't. He said for the girl, get some loan papers, you know. And one sheet, you know, in carbon. I filled it out, and they loaned me something like $18,000 with no collateral, nothing. And here I that far ahead. So the lady says, I said, is there any way I can take over, you know, I mean, this, and, oh, I don't know. And then she called me back and says, you have to have a meeting. So she met me at the edge of Pittsburgh, take me to the Mellon Bank. Went in there, I go in there, and there's a big long table with guys sitting with their hats on, you know, and the president sat here, the secretary, that Sue, sat over there, and he says to me, he says, Bill, he says, I need $50,000 plus there's $20-some thousand real estate tax to be owed and this and that. And actually I didn't have it. And we talked for a little bit, and all at once I said, you know, I said, I was here at the Steelers game Sunday. And he says, I used a cuss word, but he said, what are you doing here? You got the Browns back there. And I said, well, my son plays for the same thing again. We filled it back up. And as time went on, I went up to 1998. Well, I got involved in charity work too, some around here, doing this and doing that, and so forth. In '98, a company just went public called AMF Bowling Centers, and they wanted to buy the place. They called me a couple times. Then all of a sudden, I said, they offered me a big price, and boy, I had to think, you know. And at the time, I said, well, I don't want to sell the building and stuff. And I went back to them now. So they ended up paying me a sum that was unreal. It was twice as much as it was worth, because they had all this money. And then they said, we'll lease the place off of you for $10,000 a month, triple net lease it. And that $10,000 came. They had offered me $1,200,000 for the building. I turned it down. So after 10 years of leasing it, I got that 1.2 million back, still owned the building and land, and they went 4 more years. But in the meantime, I had bought bowling centers out in Toledo, Port Clinton, and was running those, wasn't out of the business. And then I also at the time bought a bowling lanes in 1988 over in Akron, the second largest estate bowling center. And what happened is AMF was leasing it at the time, so I had to keep the lease. And then in 2005, I took it over. And all you did, I owned everything. So what happened is a gentleman, broker, his last name was Wise. They owned the largest Chevrolet dealership in Ohio, out of Cleveland. But he did not get involved with his family. He was a lawyer, broker. He lived in Florida, and he owned Akron Lanes at that time. He called it Coliseum. And he called me up and said, I want to sell you this. He said, I wanted this figure, you know, and this. And he wanted $400,000 down. And because I had managed it some in the 1980s also. And so he said, well, I'm flying up there. We had to go up to Cleveland and met him in the highest room on the highest building in Cleveland. Went up there to the highest one. And he went through all this. And I said, I can't do it. He called me again, and we went back up. And I took Dave Williams and my CPA with me. And as we're talking, on these figures and stuff, to make things short, because we spent a half a day doing this, Dave Williams said, "How much did you take for cash?" And he said, "Oh, about 75%, what he was asking for it." So when Dave comes back, he says, Billy says, "Go to Huntington Bank and see if maybe they might think about taking a loan, you know, on it." So I went in there, and it was Kevin Lewis is who I met. And I was dealing with Huntington, by the way, at the same time through Twin Star. And he said, "Well, out of politeness, I'll go over." But what I did, I knew he wouldn't go for 75%, so I come with a figure. I deducted so many hundred thousands off of it, and I told Kevin what he wanted for it. And the two of us went over there. As we walked in the entranceway so far, all of a sudden Kevin said, "I think we can make a deal here." You know, he knew I didn't have any money to put down, because I was always paying on my loans, you know. And but he says, "I gotta get approval from Cleveland." So we went back, and the Mr. Wise from Florida flew back up, and the same group went back up, and he wanted my son involved with it, my youngest son. So anyhow, I came back up, we went up there, and we're talking about this and that, and finally Dave Williams said, no, my son said, "You said you'd take 75% for cash?" He says, "No, I never said that at all." And my son said, "Yes, you did." And they bickered a little bit, and he looked at me and he says, "Bill, did I say that?" I said, "Yes, you did." He said, "Oh, okay." And so again, he went away for an hour, and he come back, and he says, "Well," he says, "I don't really need all this money." And I says, "But I will do this figure. How about this figure?" It's the exact figure I told Kevin Lewis, exact figure. And I said, "Well, I think we can make a deal." And he wanted my son included, so I gave him a portion of the business at the time.
Would you talk a little bit about your son? I know he was a professional football player.
Yeah.
And what was his career? Did he go to school in Kent?
Yeah, Kent Roosevelt. That's my oldest son. He went to school. To this date, he's the only boy that made the state all-star team, football, baseball, and basketball, all three of them, which is like state, all-state.
Oh, wow.
And then he went to Ohio State, got a scholarship there, and I got a lot of interesting stories to tell about Woody Hayes. And,
We'll do that another day.
yeah, and when he went to Ohio State, and he not only played linebacker, but he kicked off, extra points, field goals, everything, punted some of the time, and then he got drafted by the Baltimore Colts when he, nobody knew whether he was going to go baseball or football. So when he got drafted for football, he said, "Dad," he said, "I could go try for football. If I don't make it, I can go to baseball. But if I go to baseball, I go to minor leagues, and I can't make it, then I can't go to football." So when he went to training camp with Baltimore, Ohio State's quarterback the year before was Rex Kern, and he was drafted by Baltimore and playing a defensive back. And the first day there, he asked, after practice over, he says, "Stan, how about moving in with me?" Stan says, he was number 10 on the list of linebackers. He says, "How can I move in with you?" He said, "You're going to make the team." And they played an exhibition game in Washington. He got 3 interceptions in the very first game. And so he made the team. And
Wow.
the story goes on that he was the last defensive player to call his own signals Now they get him in there. He was the last one. And all the years he played, he called his defensive signals.
How many years did he play for Baltimore?
He played 8 or 9 years for Baltimore and 3 or 4 years for 13 years total he had. He went to Detroit Lions for a while.
No?
But in 1982, when they had a strike, my son had went to school while he's playing football, the law school. You know Bob Berger? Well, they was in college together in Baltimore. And what happened is, when my son was playing football, his wife would go with a tape recorder to school and tape everything, and then he'd run it off the tape. So finally, they graduated.
He became a lawyer.
800 and some of them took the test, you know. 52% passed, because it's very strict up there. And everybody got their grades but Stan, and he didn't know what was going on. But what happened when he started school, it was stretched out. He lived in this house, and he built another house but never changed the address. So the stuff went to the house. When he came back, here he was number 4 out of the 800 and some taking it. And the next day, this Baltimore Sun had this whole front page was colored. Him and his wife, the picture of that. And being a football player, that made it more important, you know. So then after he quit football, he become a corporate lawyer, coached football, high school and stuff. And then when Cleveland moved to Baltimore, why Art Modell was the owner of Cleveland Browns at that time, and the Friday before they moved on Monday, his wife Pat called Stan and wanted to know if he'd go up on the stage, up on the podium when they made this big. You might have watched that transition. My own son was sitting over here. I watched this and didn't see. I was concentrating on Modell and all those people, you know, and so he became associated right away with radio. He done, up until this year, he's done the radio, he done commercials for him, radio, he'd done the color and announcing on Sundays and so forth.
Didn't he represent the Players Union?
Oh, in 1982, that's what I should want to say that. He represented the Players Union, and even though he was playing, because he got to be a lawyer then, he sat across from Art Modell and the Washington owner and the San Diego owner with very loud language, back and forth and stuff. And what happened is, on NBC, every morning they had my son come on TV, and there was a black anchor in the morning on NBC.
Gumbel, Brian Gumbel.
Yeah, Brian Gumbel, that's exactly what it is. He had Stan every morning, every morning, come up and tell him how the negotiations was going. So then, what I didn't tell you was he got into television, then he worked for ESPN, done the Thursday night games on television, and the Sunday night games, before that he was doing NFL Sunday night games and so forth like that. There's so much to go by, I can't get it all in.
Well, let me talk a little bit. Was there anything else about bowling specifically that we missed? Because he really talked a lot about it.
I think
But I was very interested because you were such a businessman and such an interesting entrepreneur. What did you think of Kent over the 60s and 70s?
In 1937, that would be. We stood on the sidelines then, there was no stands, it was down along
Summit Street.
There. You just walked in. And
What did you think about the big fires in Kent, when that big building, do you remember when the Kent block burned?
absolutely, because I went in there all the time, get a milkshake and a hamburger and stuff, because the Furtick girls worked there from Brady Lake and stuff. I go two places there and then over to Donaghy's. That's where we went for, and Perfection Dairy was the third alternative. And Hans Bakery too, by the way. And talk about that burning down too, you know.
There were a lot of changes downtown at that time.
Yeah, that fire was disastrous, you know, down here at the corner. Because I bought all my clothes down at Greens, is that right? Greens?
Purcell's.
Purcell.
Purcell's, yeah. Purcell's. Greens was up here, that's right.
Yeah.
And I bought a new coat one day, and brand new top coat, never had one before. So Franklin Avenue, and the pool table was up above Ray's, you know, pool room. I pulled up in front of there, jumped out of the car, let the car running, to go up to say something to somebody. By the time I come down, my coat was gone. So they stole back in those days too. But the thing is, you know, the Rathskeller was there, and all that. The whole section burnt down there, and Hans had already burnt down.
Yes.
Burnt out, I should say, and you know, we were stalemate here for many years. Nothing
Nothing was growing.
was growing.
The mall.
Well, you know, one of our big things was Haymaker bypass here, because we sat down here and waited on the trains all the time, you know, either there or here. And that was, and yet, by the way, then the mall down on 261 and 43 didn't go through. In the meantime, they planned to do what you call them, a small mall.
I mean,
You know,
yeah,
where Kent Lanes are,
just
where
strip mall they call it.
Strip Mall, Portage Community Bank is.
Right.
They were buying that whole section out of there, and they called and asked me to take over Kent Lanes as a manager for 2 years while they done all this. Well, it faded when the mall down in the corner faded. It faded out too. There's just so much I could talk all day.
Yeah. But let me ask you, I also wanted to ask you, since you were in the service and you saw the town changing, how did you react and feel during the May 4th activities, and where were you, and how did you feel about what happened to the town and yourself at
You
that
want
time?
the truth?
Absolutely. I'm only interested.
Well, my two partners down at Skylanes, the Paul brothers, was in the National Guard.
Oh,
They got called up. Naturally, they was in this. My wife was working for W.W. Reed at the time. She was there when they broke the windows. She was there when they broke in the shoe store. And Tree City Electric owner was down here changing a light when they pushed the ladder out from underneath him. He was my electrician. You know, he never was right from the time on from that. But the other thing of it was, we lived right on the end of the campus down here,
Lincoln?
down in Valley View.
Oh, yeah.
Valley View. And of course, my son was going to Ohio State at the time. And as I'm coming back from Garrettsville one night, somehow I came the back roads around here coming in, and all of a sudden here at Lincoln and Main Street, I'm going to drive there, and the tanks are across the street. The students are here throwing stones over, and the cops are saying, "Get out of here, get out of here. How'd you get here?" You know. And my wife and I were just talking, and I don't know how we did. But also the secretary that I had at Twin Star Lanes, her husband was working at Kent State, and he was telling us at the time that they had the fire up there, how the students came up and with the axe and hit the lines and stuff. And in the meantime, my Paul, since I was in daily contact with the Paul boys, the day before, had the girls had urinated in cans and threw the urination on them. And they were two of them that got coated with urination, you know, and so forth. And what happened is I became negative to the situation. I favored the National Guard over the students because of the way it was, using common sense. And in the meantime, my son come back from Ohio State. Oh, he was violent about this, the National Guard, you know, and stuff. All of a sudden, he got a phone call from Woody Hayes, get back down here. The leaders that was here are down at Ohio State now.
Yep.
And so he went back down there, and they had to stand out here talking to the students and stuff. And he got stones thrown at him.
Your son was in the National Guard?
No,
Oh,
Woody Hayes is a football team.
oh, Woody Hayes, oh, okay. Right.
Called his students back there to line up to talk to the students and stuff of it. And he got stones thrown at him. So he changed his opinion overnight, you know. And so I have read every story that's been, and I've never seen but one story that was even close to being the truth of what it is. Because the only good thing that came out of this whole deal was that it stopped them nationwide from doing that. That's what I've been told. And it was a horrible thing. It was a horrible thing. And naturally, my wife was in the building when they broke the glass down here.
Friday
She was
night?
scared. You know, W.W. Reed. And so we sort of formed an opinion the opposite way that the majority of people have felt.
Well, that's why we ask you to tell the truth.
Yeah, because I knew all the back stuff and this and that. And I knew real quick that the guys that told me that there was this group of guys that came in and got this all started, you know, then took off.
And did you have people who were in the Vietnam War fighting? Did you know people?
Oh, I knew people, but I didn't.
Right. You didn't have.
I didn't know what it, I didn't know how bad it was. A horrible one. It was a very horrible one. Now, as I look at it, I'd do anything to keep out of the service. But when I went into service, I was so eager to go in, I was jumping in. But now then, I can see their views.
You mean the protest, the sense that.
Protest views, yeah.
Well, that's
I just
important.
don't like about how they went about it, because it was vicious. And they hurt a lot of people. We've had a lot of suicides over false accusations and so forth.
Suicides of whom? I'm sorry.
Service people.
By National Guard.
Oh, okay.
Over that bad stories that came out, it wasn't true and stuff. Am I correct in that?
I don't know specifically about suicides, but I think it's important.
Yeah, there's books around here talking about the suicides
Uh-huh.
that was created
From the May 4th.
May 4th, yes.
Okay, I
And
think
the
there are
other
a
thing,
lot of,
the other thing I don't like about it is that people's made their life livings off of this.
Mhm.
They keep it up. I've donated a lot of money to Kent State athletic stuff and stuff, but the May 4th gets in my groin every year.
Okay.
We're at mercy of that May 4th every year. So,
And so here you are now at the in the prime of your life. You're a nice young man, and you're still active in Kent and with charity, correct?
yeah, and various things here in charity, and Pete Mahoney and Mark Pashone keep me busy doing stuff. They come up with all kind of ideas, one right after another. And Pete Mahoney got me started in Kent State. Kevin Lewis got started in the foundation, Portage Foundation down here, along with Ralph
Kletzian.
Yeah, he got me involved in that. And here's the way I looked at it. All the parents, grandparents, and kids made it possible for me to have a successful business. So that's why I'm giving back to Portage County, and you know, I give scholarships every year to kids in the high school bowling from 5 to 9 every year. And the hospital saved my life a couple times, by the way, so I donate to the hospital.
Weren't you on the foundation board?
Yeah, I was on there for 9 years, well, with you.
Right.
Well, it's obvious your story is about a lot of people that helped you out, and the fact that you're doing it is good.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Well, here's what, I got a couple of people telling me I'm crazy what I do. But I said, so many people help me out, just like that lady handed me a $10,000 check,
Yeah.
you know, and stuff like that. And there's more people than that to help me out in the pinch, you know.
Yeah.
And one thing I've done about it, everybody that's helped me out, I've paid them back double.
Oh, good. That's
Yeah.
good to hear.
I did, yeah.
Well, is there anything you would like to say that I haven't, or Jim hasn't asked you, that you want people to know about your life in Kent?
Well, it's really been a successful life for me, and also to raise my kids in Kent, because of it, they all played sports in Kent Roosevelt. And my second son went to Albion, Michigan College to become a doctor, and that was in 1974, 75, when everything went to the gender type of thing. So he either had to go to Mexico or Sweden to become a doctor, and there was a couple at the city hospital where he was doing his apprenticeship, and said something about going into physical therapy down in Alliance. And he went down there 40-some years ago, opened up an office, and then worked for the hospital a little bit, and then opened up a huge office. And he's got a clinic down there for over 40 years. And he's been a doctor for the Mount Union football, baseball, basketball team, and for the school team, high school, for over 40 years. He only missed 3 Friday nights in 40 years of doing it. I'm very proud of him. And of course, my other son, took him a while to find out what it was, but he went to Denver seminary, and became a pastor. Spent a lot of years out in Wabash, Indiana. He's now got a church over in Greene, Cottage Grove Church in Greene. And when I had the bowling lanes over in Akron, we were the first in the whole world to start a bowling lanes in our bowling center. I mean, a church in our bowling center.
Oh.
So for 4.5 years, we had before I sold it, we had a church in our bowling lanes. And we had Channel 5, Channel 8 covered us down there on our things. We had weddings over there, and on one occasion, the 2 seniors was getting married, and the guy who was supposed to walk the bride down the concourse didn't show up. So the groom says, "Bill, will you do it?" So I got walking down. It was on TV, Channel 5 or 8, whichever it was. They'd done some of that stuff, and then my son performed a couple of marriages there too, you know, in the bowling lanes. Because a lot of people met in the bowling lanes and they decided to get married there.
Well, that's good. They don't want to strike out.
Oh, is that the word? Yeah, I catch that. Yeah,
That's
what's
wonderful.
happened is I enjoy what I'm doing in charity.
Good.
It's fun to see. Where I got my big surprise is this last 3 years is that I didn't know how many people dedicated, after they retired, dedicated their time 100% to charity.
Mm-hmm.
and getting with Mark Fasone and Pete Mahoney and Julie Beach and all those people, they just donate their time. Well, Mark gets paid, but probably a big salary. But I'm on the board there too, and social services down here. We're going to improve. We're going to extend the building down here at social services. The Center of Hope over here, I get involved with.
It's good.
And then we, at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and especially, you know, we give out 500-600 packages of turkeys and everything. Kent State students come and help us, senior citizens, high school students get off to help us box everything up. And just, it's a warm feeling. I'm trying to get my wife involved this year in helping to box things up. We're using General Electric this year for Thanksgiving and Christmas to do it. Then we use the Center of Hope for, oh, a funny thing happened at Center of Hope. They let me do the thing of handing out this plastic silverware to everybody that came in. We had 140 families signed up for Center of Hope, you know. And me being in this business 57 years here, involved in everything, until the last family came in, I didn't recognize one person, or they didn't recognize me, not one, because you don't go any place, been in business this long in Kent, that you don't run into somebody, whether it's Florida or whether it's Aruba or wherever it may be, you run into somebody from Kent or somebody you're associated with. The one thing I hate to this day is traveling and stuff. Everybody relates to May 4th in Kent, no matter where we're at. California, Las Vegas. Oh yeah, I heard about Kent, you know. And that's a sticker that you don't like to talk about.
I want to throw in one thing.
Go ahead.
Talk about the change that happened in bowling when you went from a hard rubber ball to the balls that are used today.
Well, back in the old days, we used to have real wood pins.
Oh, yeah.
And the boys used to set them by hand. At one time you had, at each spot, you had
Pins.
stickers, steel points coming up, and we'd set the pins on that. I'd done that down in Norrisburg. And you had a lever here, you know, the pins all wobbled. Then they come up with a pin setter that the boys could take and throw the pins in and push it down, shake it, set it up, and so forth. Then it come along where they called it semi. All we had to do is touch it, and it would go down itself and set it up. And then, of course, in the 1950s, later 50s, come the automatic pin setters. But in the meantime, all we had was rubber balls. Rubber is all, everything was rubber. The surface on it was wood pins. It was like, not oak up front, but
Maple and pine.
Maple and pine down below. And we coated it first with shellac, and then we went to urethane, and then we went to lacquer, and all you had to do is throw a match out there, and a lacquer level would catch on. In the meantime, the bowling pins was, like you say, all wood, and you could get from 3 pound 2 to 3 pound 14 ounce. There's mixed weights, you know, and so forth. And we're throwing that rubber ball at the, and they had weight blocks in it, and all the weight blocks was a cone-shaped thing. And so everybody was on the same page, bowling in that. We had what we called a conventional ball back in his dad's days, conventional, and then we went to what we call the fingertip, which is much easier to get more revolutions on. Then in 1960, a company down in Texas come up with plastic balls called Columbia. And I was the first to handle Columbia in this whole area, and I got the signed a sheet of paper saying that I had all this area, you know, and at the pro shop that was. And then we, in plastic, we sort of had colored, well, the men aren't going to throw a colored ball, you know. So we got the plastic ball, it had a little bit more grip to it, to the lanes. Then up come urethane. We put on the lane surface urethane out here, which was water-based urethane, which now we couldn't worry about the fire. In the meantime, they started putting a coat on the pins, about like that. That would, see, in the old days, when we had lacquer on the pins, it was the greatest place to start a fireplace.
Oh, God.
Just put one in there. People was always asking for the pins. So then they got this coating on it and lacquer too, but still, it was still a good fire pin. Then along come from the urethane ball, we went to the resin ball.
Oh, yeah.
And now we're going back. Remember, we got smooth tires on your car, and snow tires? Well, now this had a better grip on the lanes and wouldn't bounce when it hit the pins and so forth. So now then, that helped bowlers. And then we get the top weight, but they start balancing it this way. There's companies all over. China comes in, Japan comes in. All countries are starting making their own bowling balls and so forth. And then we came to urethane, resin, particle ball. Now it gripped like a snow tire, a big snow tire. So now then, and we went to urethane all over. Even now then, we changed the lane beds to urethane. We put it on top of the wood lanes. We put a small layer of urethane on it. So now you don't have, we used to have to get them sanded every couple of years. Now you have to close down for a week, have the fire department alerted, you know, because of the lacquer and stuff. And in 1957, I got my first 300 game, and there was 26 bowling centers in Summit County at that time. Now there's only 6 or 7. But I got 17 300s. I mean, there were 17 300s shot in the state of Ohio, and I had one of them. 5 years ago, we've lost almost 3/4 of our league bowlers, and there was over 30,000 300s. That's what Jim's bringing me up to doing.
And it was 220 average at a time when it was unbelievable.
Yeah, 220 was the highest average in the state of Ohio back that one year. Dick Hoover had won it the year before with 222, and I had 220. Now then, we have a traveling league out of Stark County, goes around, where almost everybody on the team averages 220. This destroyed bowling, destroyed it. It was on television, it was a great entertainment thing. Golf has taken over on that. And, but they strictly ruined it. And they're so strict on how we dressed the lanes. When I first was out at Twins Midway, I dressed the lanes. I thought it was a spray gun, which your dad had done for years. Spray gun and cross-wiped it. Then we got a kind of machine that would put down some oil and brush it, you know. Terrible, but we'd do it. Then we learned to put shims in here to make the oil be heavier, because the pressure would make the oil heavier. Put it in the middle, you know, so it would help get into the pocket, you know. Then in the 1970s, they come up with a machine that would not only strip the lane, but dress the lane. Wasn't a very good situation.